So, I was recently flipping through a popular Portuguese textbook until I came across this part that said that tu, as a way of addressing someone as you, was seldom used in Brazil. But is that really true? There's some very important context missing here. And in this video, we're going to find out just exactly what that is. And we'll be looking at a few clips to illustrate where and how exactly tu is used.
O cara mexeu com a tua mulher, tu vai querer estudar o cara, mano?
But more importantly, we're going to find out what that means for you as a Portuguese learner. Now, if you're learning Portuguese using resources that specifically teach the Brazilian variety, you might not even know that tu exists in the language. Most textbooks and apps that are focused on Brazilian Portuguese will teach you that você is the general way of saying you. And there's usually little mention, if any, of tu. But tu is very widely used in Brazil. In fact, there are places where você is hardly even used, and tu is by far the most common form of address. It's just not typically used the way you see it taught in traditional grammar textbooks. But before we take a look at how tu is used in practice, we first need to understand it from a classical Portuguese grammar perspective. So, tu is an informal form of address, which you generally use with close friends and family, people around your own age or younger, and it comes with its own set of conjugations. For example, you go would be tu vais. You went would be tu foste. This is how tu is used in Portugal, with the standard conjugations that you see in textbooks. Compare that to você, which takes on verbs in the third person singular. In other words, you conjugate it the same way that you would for he or she in Portuguese. Ele and ela. So it would be você vai, you go, and você foi, you went. Now, before we see how tu is used in Brazil, let's first talk about where it's used the most. So it's most widely used in the north, northeast, and south of the country. In much of these areas, tu tends to be the dominant form of address in informal situations, whereas você, if it's used at all, tends to be slightly more formal and reserved for people you don't know as well. But when tu is used, it's typically not used with its standard conjugations as it's used in Portugal. To see what I mean, we're going to check out a clip with Giselle, who's from Rio Grande do Sul.
Tu acha que tu vai ter filhos e que tu vai ensinar alguma coisa para eles, mas acho que eu tô achando que eles estão me ensinando mais.
She says, tu acha que tu vai ter filhos? You think that you're going to have kids? E que tu vai ensinar alguma coisa para eles, and that you're going to teach them something. So instead of using the standard tu conjugations, tu achas, you think, and tu vais, you go, we see her use the third person singular, tu acha and tu vai. Now let's check out this clip of Fabrício Verdun, who's also from Rio Grande do Sul, but from the capital of Porto Alegre.
Aí tu vai lá e estuda o cara, vê o que o cara faz.
He says, tu vai lá e estuda o cara. You go there and study the guy. So this is in the context of studying his opponents. Once again, the standard tu conjugations, tu vais and tu estudas, aren't used, but rather the third person singular. Tu vai and tu estuda. So this is considered grammatically incorrect according to traditional Portuguese grammar, but this is how you'll most likely hear it in Brazil. Now, there are small pockets in the country where the proper tu conjugations are still used. For example, the city of Belém in the north is one of the places where you'll still hear it, especially among the older generation. But even there, you'll still hear tu used with the third person singular as well. For example, Lyoto Machida, who was born and raised in Belém, in every single interview that I've seen him do, he's always used tu with the third person singular.
O cara mexeu com a tua mulher, tu vai querer estudar o cara, mano?
So tu is dominant in much of the north, northeast, and south. But there are other parts of the country that use it as well. For example, in Rio, it's a mixed bag between tu and você. You'll hear people using both interchangeably. A perfect example of this is City of God. You'll constantly hear the characters switching back and forth between the two. Again, always using tu with the third person singular. For the vast majority of Brazilians, The standard tu conjugations sound really archaic, like something you would see in religious texts, older literature, kind of like how thou art sounds to English speakers. You'll actually also hear it in some bossa nova songs. Jobim has a few songs where he does use it. But generally speaking, it's not something that's all that common anymore in modern Brazilian Portuguese. So what does this all mean for you, the Portuguese learner? Do you need to learn the standard tu conjugations? If you're solely focused on Brazilian Portuguese, then the answer is probably no. First of all, você has pretty much become the de facto standard in mass media. It's what you're much more likely to see in newspapers, magazines, advertisements, on TV. If you turn on the Brazilian Portuguese captions for an American movie or TV show, they'll almost always use você to translate you. And as we saw, when tu is used, it's almost always used with the third person singular. Now, if you plan on spending a lot of time in Portugal, then it would make sense to learn the standard conjugations. But even then, you could still get by just with você. I hope you got value from this video. If you did, make sure to hit that like button and check out my video on fast spoken Portuguese. Até a próxima. Ciao.